Hi, and welcome back to the Pragmatic Alchemy podcast. I am your host, Courtney, and today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, yet one that I really don't know a ton about. And so I have been fortunate enough to be connected with a professional that is going to talk about this great topic with us. So today on the podcast, we have Emily Trinkaus, who is a podcast host in her own right. She's an astrologer, an energy healer, a creator, and a group facilitator. And her podcast is called the Embodied Aquarian Age Podcast, which I love because I'm an Aquarius. So good job with your naming. My first question might be, how did you come up with it? But we're so excited to have you here because I know just a lot of curiosity around astrology. I think, we've sort of discussed in our prep this idea that folks tend to be pretty familiar maybe with their sun sign. Next level might be sun, moon, and rising. But you're going to take us into a more holistic approach, it sounds like, and how to really utilize this as a component of a well-being practice. So thank you so much for being with us. And why don't we start with you just telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you came into this work.
Great. Thank you so much, Courtney. I'm really happy to be here. I love the name of your podcast, Pragmatic Alchemy, all about it.
Thank you.
Um, so I got into astrology when I was 13. I read a book that some of the listeners might be familiar with called Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. It was a big sensation back in the 70s and 80s. And something about it just lit me up. I think I've probably done lifetimes of being an astrologer. So there was something about the language of astrology that just immediately spoke to me. And, I didn't grow up in a woo environment at all. I grew up on the East Coast, not far from where you are, very intellectual, atheist kind of environment. But there was something that just made sense to me about astrology. And this was very basic sun signs. And of course, we're going to talk, beyond sun signs. But even just with that awareness of sun signs at that time, to be able to look at myself and the people around me and have a way of kind of organizing. I'm a Virgo, so I like organization, kind of organizing um, people into different, it's almost, I guess, like having more acceptance around everybody's different, everybody's coming from a different place. So it's not that I'm right, they're wrong, but more
Mhm.
like, wow, look at that, this is what a Capricorn looks like, this is what an Aries looks like. So I got very passionate about astrology, and people who are into astrology know that it's a little bit like a drug. It can get very addictive once you scratch the surface and then realize how much more there is. So I went down the rabbit hole, got some other books, and would secretly analyze everybody I knew, everyone who I could get, birth info for, and did that for many years. But I was on track to become an academic. I always loved to teach and loved to write, and I was good at school, and so that was my path. I was going to be a college professor. But around my actually approaching my Saturn return, which happens for everyone around age 29, the first Saturn return tends to be a big turning point, a big time of really coming into who am I separate from where I came from, but what's my purpose? What's my dharma? What am I really here to do? And approaching my Saturn return, I dropped out of graduate school. I was like, this is not my beautiful life. And I ended up living in New York City and for the first time studied with an actual astrologer. And that really, after studying on my own and secretly and analyzing charts and reading books, like that really brought things together. And at that point, I started doing readings for friends who told their friends. So things just kind of developed organically. And now it's, I'm now 53, so I've been playing with astrology for 40 years and have been doing it professionally since 1999. And I have to say, it continues to evolve, and my understanding of astrology continues to change and grow. It's endless. There's so much to it. Um, so, this idea that astrology is just sun signs and horoscopes, people who haven't had a reading before or haven't really gone into it might say, "Oh, I don't believe in astrology. That's ridiculous."
Mhm.
And what I like to say is, one, I don't believe in the same astrology that you don't believe in, right? Like,
Mm,
I don't
I
believe in
like
that
that.
either.
Mhm.
And two, that actually astrology is not a belief system, right?
Mhm.
No belief required. As one of my favorite astrologers, Caroline Casey, says, believe nothing,
Mhm.
entertain possibilities. So, astrology, one way to think about it is that it is a symbolic language. So, saying you don't believe in astrology is like saying, well, I don't believe in Portuguese. Well, that's okay. People are going to keep on speaking it, whether you believe it or not,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Um, it's a symbolic language. And anyone who's had a professional reading or who has gone on that a deep dive on their own knows that when we look at a person's astrology, we're looking at all the planets. We're looking at where all the planets were, not just the sun, not even
Mhm.
just the moon, not just your rising sign. We're looking at all of the planets and how they relate to one another,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is, you end up with a map of your psyche that's totally unique to you. It's based on your date, time, and place of birth. So, unless someone was born at the exact same time, exact same place, nobody else has your chart.
Right.
So, it's
Right.
this incredible map. And I think one of the big, well, I'll just say for myself, I guess two of the things that I really value about knowing astrology at that level in terms of the personal birth chart, one is it really brings to consciousness parts of ourselves that are more unconscious. It's basically like a map showing you what on some level you already know, right? I
Mhm.
think and I think people who are super connected with their own being and intuition and totally in sync with natural rhythms and who trust themselves, they don't need astrology. But most of us are pretty disconnected from our own intuitive knowing,
Mhm.
or we know it, we feel something, but then our mind kicks in or the voices in our head kick in and talk us out of it.
Mm.
So I feel like a lot of what I do as an astrologer in terms of, one-on-one work is helping people, well, let me just say validating what people already know, but maybe what they've been afraid to admit or acknowledge or even honor in themselves. I think it's really powerful for somebody who, let's say somebody who's always wanted to be an artist, you
Mhm.
know, but instead they're an accountant or something. They
Right.
did
Right.
what was the practical thing, right? To have a complete stranger look at a bunch of squiggles on a piece of paper and say, "Hey, what's up with your creativity? Do you make art? Because it's really supported here."
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very validating. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say because you're hitting a lot of points that are kind of the anchor that draw me into this in the first place. Is so I am an Aquarius sun and a Capricorn moon, and there's a meme that I frequently see on Instagram that says, "I love spontaneity as long as it's carefully planned," and like, that's me, and my whole life, I was always like, "Why do I feel in a lot of ways like these dichotomous pulls?" Like,
Yes.
really wanting to just kinda do my own thing, march to my own drum, be free-spirited, and also have a calendar that is meticulous. I've come to the imagery of a bird in a nest, like my
Mm.
Aquarian bird and my Capricorn nest, but I never really it just always felt like there was something weird about me, that I had these very kind of opposite ways of being that coexisted within me until I had that language, exactly as you are describing it. I was like, "Oh, that actually makes a ton of sense. That resonates really deeply with me." And it helped me just kind of, uh, understand myself, accept myself, explain myself a little bit better.
Yes.
I also wanted to kinda real quick, just an aside, go back to your idea about being an academic. I actually do teach, graduate level counseling students, and I tell them all the time when I teach the career counseling class, that if I ever go back and get my PhD, my dream dissertation is to do a study that cross-references zodiac with Myers-Briggs types.
Oh, so cool. May
Because
it be so.
J, and I feel like an INFJ is an Aquarius with a Capricorn moon. Like, I just there's
Yes.
so much intersection there, and I'm like, that's I don't know if I would ever get an advisor to sign off on that, but that would literally be my favorite dissertation in the history of the world.
Well, and you are so set up to write something like that because what Aquarius and Capricorn do have in common is that they're both really good at systems and like that
Mhm.
bigger picture and
Yeah,
being able
yeah,
to
yeah.
systemize things to see that, to get that kind of objective, bigger viewpoint, which is
Yeah,
very
yeah.
cool. Um, yeah, this way of astrology giving us a way to talk about these
Mhm.
complicated I mean, we are complicated beings, and when you look at
Right,
a chart, it's like, yeah, we have all these different parts of ourselves, and to be able to see how these different parts of ourselves relate and where the tension is, and it's not I don't see anything in astrology as good or bad, right? It's like
right.
it's more like genetic material. What are you gonna do with it? Like,
Mhm,
this
mhm.
is, these are the tendencies, these are the basic, what you have to work with, but what you do with it, I think that's where the free will comes in.
Right, right. The other thing, and again, this kind of crossover between the academic, things like the Myers Briggs is, I always tell my students that if you're administering one of those assessments, that really what you're providing your client is a mirror to be able to say, I recognize myself in that, or I don't recognize myself in that, and then have a conversation around those parallels or those places of discord that don't quite fit. And I often feel the same when I talk to folks about astrology, even at the, kind of the more basic level that I do, that it's really just like a way to have a conversation, to be able to say, well, yeah, that sounds like me, or no, that doesn't sound like me. And then, well, what parts sound like you and what doesn't? And can we now like get in there and explore that idea of identity and self-exploration and the conscious and the unconscious and these the way we present to the world versus the way we see ourselves. I think that's where there's a lot of great just fiber to really dive into and help people again just kind of know and understand themselves a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think what you also spoke to is the acceptance
Yes,
aspect
I'm a big
of
one for
that.
that. Yeah.
Right? Like, me too, huge. Like, I feel like astrology gives us such a huge permission slip to be ourselves, and
Hmm.
the problems come in, as you know from your work in psychology, the problems come in when we're repressing parts of ourselves, like for
Hmm.
your example, like, let's say the Capricorn moon took over and suppressed the Aquarian, like, "No, that's being too weird," or "I can't
Right.
talk about this," or "People won't like me," or something, and right? Like, that's when the
Yeah.
problems come in. So I see, astrology at the level of working with the birth chart as a practice of coming into deeper, more conscious relationship with all of ourselves and
Hmm.
making sure that all of ourselves have a voice in our life or some place to show up in our
Hmm.
life, right? And because you shared your sun and moon, something else that I know about your chart is that you were born in what's called the balsamic moon phase, which is the very end of the lunar
That's fascinating.
cycle. Okay. And this is, and
Because my
maybe
brain
we'll
went to vinegar, and I was like, "Yes, and I love vinegar." But yeah, I don't know if that counts. Yeah, no, go ahead.
it does get and it's called the balsamic moon phase, not because of the vinegar, but because
Okay.
of balsam incense, because it's a very
Oh,
mystical
oh, see, that's much
phase.
better than vinegar. Thank you. I like
You can
that.
like vinegar too, um, but but paying attention to what was actually happening in the sky, like what did the
Mhm,
sky look like when you were born? Well, it was the dark of the moon,
mhm,
right? Because you were at the end of the lunar cycle, and being born at the end of the lunar cycle brings in this sense of being a mystic,
mhm,
right? Having a very deep inner life, and it's kind of magical and witchy, and also someone who has a certain comfort level or familiarity with endings, with that phase of letting go, and maybe someone who's really good at helping other people who are going through endings or deaths, literal or metaphorical, being
Mhm,
kind of a
mhm.
shepherd for them because you're familiar with that. There's also an old idea that whatever phase of the moon you were born in, that says something about your soul's, like where your soul is at in terms of various cycles, and that you are
Okay.
in a completion cycle in this lifetime.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
Also, knowing what phase of the moon you were born in is just very practical on a basic level, because every month when we come into that phase of the moon, that's a power time. So
Mhm,
your
mhm.
power time is like a couple days before the new moon, like at the very end of the cycle. And that's a very
Yeah.
fertile, creative time for you. So, yeah.
That's spot on too. It's so funny. I was just talking to somebody who's also really into astrology and moon cycles, and I was planning a candle making event. And I had originally scheduled it over the summer to do it in alignment with the full moon. And then when I rescheduled it for next month, I was like, actually think I want to do it in the new moon because
Mm.
I mean, the full moon's beautiful and you go out and all the cameras, it's very gorgeous, la, la, la. You can see it. I always say hi to her. But yeah, new moon energy it definitely hits different for me. That's awesome. Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yep. You're a dark of the moon baby.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and what I was going to say too, in terms of like the other really useful piece to me for astrology in terms of the personal birth chart, is understanding what time it is.
Mhm,
Um, so, when you have a personal reading, on the one hand, you're looking at just like, who am I? What's my purpose? Why did I incarnate? What is this lifetime about? But then there's also, well, what's happening now in the sky? And how is that interacting with my personal chart?
mhm,
And that really tells you, what time is it?
mhm.
Sometimes it's time to roar, go for it, and push and assert and be in that more young, forward momentum, risk taking energy. Sometimes it's time to just let it all go and surrender and, no, stop pushing the river, right?
Right, right.
So I find astrology incredibly useful as a navigational tool in terms of what is the purpose of this time period. And again, my job is just to validate what people already know. It's
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
oh, I'm exhausted and I don't really know. It's like, yeah, good, good. Take a nap. Like this is nap time. You're doing, there's like deep unconscious clearing work happening, and don't do too much right now, right?
Right, right,
And
right,
other
yeah.
times it's like, hey, go for it. Cosmic wind at your back, take a risk, jump in,
Mhm,
experiment. And again, when we're totally in tune with our own being, we just naturally respond to life that way. But we live in a culture where we're supposed to be go forward, push,
correct.
right, all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Like clock time or culture's time doesn't account for natural cycles,
It
right?
accounts for nothing but bottom dollar.
Right.
I will go
Right.
on a deep anti-capitalistic rage right now, but yes,
Right,
yes,
that so-called
yes,
progress, right,
yeah,
versus like what's actually in harmony with nature. And so
right.
what I want to say about astrology too is that astrology is nature,
Mhm,
right? And just as our ancient ancestors used to be able to, wander around and pick up a plant and say, oh, this will heal my, you know belly, or, let me take this bark off the tree to ease my pain or whatever, they would also look up at the sky and had a direct relationship with
mhm,
the sky. So they would know, okay, now it's time to, well, let me just say, I have a friend who grew up as a nomad in Somalia, and they
mhm.
had an astrologer, a tribe astrologer, who would look up and say, it's time to move, drought is coming, or it's time to move the herds, or the right.
Yeah,
Like, that's astrology. It's about having a direct relationship with nature.
mm,
And it's just that we've lost the sky as part of nature, and
right.
especially people who live in cities and can't even see the freaking sky or can't
That's
see the
right, that's right.
stars,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's part of our it's part of just being a human and relating to nature, relating to natural cycles. And there's a phrase I really like called sky clock, right? So to see the sky as simply telling us what time it is, right? Oh, it's a new moon. Okay, time to plant seeds, right? Time to
Right.
all new life starts in the dark of the
Mhm.
moon. You plant your seeds, you set your intentions, you set things into motion. Ah, it's the full moon. Okay, time to harvest. Things are coming to fruition,
Right.
right?
Right.
And there's a whole ancient knowing of when to plant, when to harvest, which kinds of things to plant or harvest at certain times based on the lunar cycle.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right,
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
and it's quite simple actually, and that is a real cycle of creation, fruition, destruction,
Right.
right? As all life goes through that cycle. I mean, we can think about the sun's cycle too, the cycle of light, and we
Mhm.
have the
Mhm.
ancient holy days or power days of the
Right.
equinoxes and solstices and cross quarter holy days. And that's all based on the relationship between the sun and earth.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
astrology. Like it's pretty basic in that sense.
It's true, and it's funny, there's 2, different, ways that I sort of unknowingly incorporate that into work. One is I do, a lot of, psychoeducation and workshops on sleep cycles, and I talk
Mm.
about the cycles of, like, circadian rhythm and day and night
Yes.
and annual cycles because I think that we lose the understanding that we're biological creatures and
Right.
that we ebb and flow just like every other natural cycle does. And we live in an artificial world that's artificially lit, and that messes us up in ways that people don't recognize and then internalize as there's something wrong with them.
Right.
And then along those same lines is, I try to really normalize, what is labeled as seasonal affective disorder to remind folks that we have hibernatory cycles, that our
Yes.
metabolism responds to the change throughout the year. And again, like we don't remember that we are of the earth the same way the animals are, and that there's going to be an impact on the way that our whole system is responding to its environment in that way. And we don't have contact with that anymore to be able to think about it in that way, and then it messes us up because we think that we're broken.
So well put. And I'm hearing the wisdom of your balsamic Capricorn moon, because Capricorn is one of those signs, and honestly, we could probably say this about every sign, but maybe especially Capricorn, that gets such a sort of bad rap or distortion, right? So if you read about, oh, I'm a sun's, or well, Capricorn. I have a lot of Capricorn in my chart. Okay, so I'm ambitious and only
Mhm.
care about getting to the top and stepping on people as I go there or whatever, right? There's this whole like distorted idea of Capricorn. I really like in shamanic astrology, they reframe Capricorn as the council of 13 grandmothers who determine what's best for the next 7 generations. Capricorn is an earth sign. It's about
Oh,
deep
yeah.
earth wisdom, right? And that like we need to be thinking about our future. And well, Aquarius is a sign that's very future oriented too, but it's like
Mhm.
bringing in like moving into a new future as humans, Aquarius, based on this ancient wisdom of these natural cycles and needing to be in harmony and aligning with natural cycles. Otherwise, we do feel crazy and maybe we get crazy, our bodies are
Right,
so out of
right.
sync.
Yeah, yeah, or yeah, we just misconstrue these very natural fluctuations with pathology. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And with the
that's
moon
fascinating.
cycle and sleep, I mean, I know my sleep around the time of the full moon is terrible. And then instead of thinking like there's something wrong with me or whatever, it's like, yep, it's a full moon and I'm not sleeping. Okay, I'll get up and meditate or go for a walk or
Right.
something. That's just that's just what time it is.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a little bit of an aside, but you've used a few terms, dharma and incarnation, and I'm curious, do you have a Buddhist flavor text to this work? Is that something also that you're drawn to, or
I
is there just
I
overlay in language?
it, it, I have studied some Buddhism, and I am a regular meditator. I'm
Okay.
big on meditation and have a very strong spiritual connection as my kind of foundation or orientation to astrology. And I take an evolutionary perspective
Mhm.
to astrology. I would say I'm very non-denominational when it
Okay.
comes to my spirituality, but it's just more about my practice. And but certainly when it comes to astrology, and this is another great um, I don't know, tool or aspect of astrology, that you can look at where is someone coming from as a soul. So they're
Yes.
kind of like the your default mode or survival programs that you come in with that we can be quite unconscious of, and also looking at, well, what am I what is my soul doing in this lifetime? What am I here to do? And what's a way of being that's new for me on a soul level, but is really going to be ultimately more fulfilling and work better for me?
Mhm.
I focus a lot on those themes in the chart. I like that um, bigger evolutionary trajectory to help contextualize what I'm up to in this lifetime, or what a
Oh my
person
gosh,
is
I
up to
love
in
it.
this lifetime.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's very cool. That's very cool. So, if we are talking to folks about kind of practical applications, I'm sure listeners are hungry to hear a little bit about individual signs, and I'm not sure if we have the time to cover that. If you have a a way that you approach that, but just thinking about that pragmatic piece, the practical piece. How can people use this? So we've talked a lot about deeply understanding, recognizing, being able to explain themselves, understand themselves. But are there maybe ways that this shows up in a daily practice, or kind of concrete things that people can do beyond, checking out their horoscope?
Yeah, I would say fundamentally, I think the most important thing is having a relationship with the sky,
Hmm.
having a direct relationship. And honestly, this is something that I came into pretty far into my career as an astrologer, because for me most of it was about what's this piece of paper with a bunch of symbols on it,
Right.
right? Versus, well, let me go outside and look at Venus and
Ugh,
open my
nothing
heart.
makes me happier. Can I just tell? I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yes,
but nothing makes me happier than seeing Venus.
right?
It
So
is my
what's
favorite thing on earth to just look up and be like, "Oh, there she is."
and Venus is such an easy one because Venus is most of the time visible, right? And
Yes.
she's
Yes.
still a morning star, right? Either
Yep.
she
Yep.
comes up before the sun or she comes up just before sunset. She goes
Yeah.
through two
Yep.
different phases of morning star, evening star. Very easy planet to make a connection with. And I love what you say about it, because Venus is, she's the goddess of love,
She is.
right? And Venus is all about what gives us pleasure, what makes us feel good. So I love, you're totally connected with
I got
Venus.
very excited. So when I about 8 years ago now, I guess, I was getting divorced, and it just so happened that in that November, December, January of my earliest separation, when I would drive home, Venus was just hanging just above the horizon for almost my entire drive. And so,
Mm,
obviously very painful transitionary time of my life, and it was just like she was guiding me home. And so there
yes.
was, yeah, so there's a very, like, it is my favorite thing in the whole wide world. I mean, I get really jazzy when we see any of the planets because it just reminds us, like, what we're a part of, but Venus has my heart. Yeah, for sure. All right. We had a little glitch, little internet glitch. Maybe it was cosmic. I don't know. But anyway, we were talking about Venus, Emily.
Yes. Well, and I want to say that you mentioned 8 years ago, which is
Mhm.
significant to Venus's cycle. Venus actually has an 8 year, what's called a synodic cycle, which is her dance with the sun. And so Venus is comes back to the same place every 8 years. So, and there's a whole thing
Oh,
you can do personally, like age 8, age 16, age 24. These are all big Venus years. So if you're
okay.
in your, I mean, sweet 16, right? Or if you're in
Right,
a
right,
Venus
right.
year, if you're in a birthday year that whatever divides by 8, then you're in a Venus
Okay.
year, and all the Venus themes are very strong. And you can often see that quite literally.
Interesting.
So that's interesting. But yeah, so going outside and actually having a direct relationship with the sky. So and if Venus, excites you, then say like, okay, I'm going to get up early every morning and go outside and commune with Venus and see what she has to say to me, right? There's this level of
Mm,
astrology that doesn't have to do with books or experts or what anyone else has to say, but has to do with, how do I feel when I connect with this planet? How do I
mhm,
feel when I go outside during an eclipse and
mm,
watch
mhm,
that
mhm,
watch the moon disappear or watch it become blood red, and what's going on
mhm,
there,
mhm.
right? Um
Right.
so because I think, when it comes to somebody's own chart and understanding themselves, for that, it's so helpful to get an actual astrology reading, because on your own it's like trying to read a book in French or something. It's a
Mm,
different
mhm,
language,
mhm,
right? There are some good books. I'm just going to mention one because I think it's so life changing. And it is all about your soul's purpose and where you're from and where you're going. And it's written very accessibly, and it's super
okay,
pragmatic. It's called Astrology for the Soul by Jan
okay,
Spiller. And she gives very, like, you find your north node, you find your chapter, you read it, and it changes your life. And she gives very practical, small steps you can take. It's
okay, I love
fantastic.
that, and I'll link to that in the show notes
Cool.
so
Um,
people can find it, yeah.
but in terms of just working with astrology day to day, I think one, yeah, going outside, having a relationship with the sky, seeing what turns you on, what excites you, what speaks to you. But
Mhm,
also the moon is just, it's so easy to work with. It's so
mhm,
obvious that, month long cycle, 29 and a half day cycle from new moon to full moon back to new moon. Just
right,
paying attention, even if you just start with the new moon and the full moon,
right,
notice how you feel, notice what's happening. And then, like, basic, like, if I want to start something, if I want to get something off the ground, I'm going to do that between the new moon and the full moon. I'm going to do that when the
right,
energy is building, when the energy is waxing, when the moon is waxing.
yeah,
If I want
yeah,
to let go of something, if I want to end a relationship or quit a job or get a wart taken off or a mole removed, I'm going to do that after the full moon, because then the energy
right,
is waning and that's supporting you. Like, this is just such a simple way to go with the flow instead of pushing the river, right? If I want to plan a
yeah,
party, if I want to have a big celebration, I'm not going to do that at the dark of the moon, right? On the new moon, everyone wants to retreat. It's dark. We're more
right,
tired, we're more inward, it's witchy and magical. Yeah, maybe I'll get together and make some candles with some friends. That could be a cool new moon activity, right? But I'm
right,
not
right,
going to have
right,
a big dance party. Everyone's going to be like, "Oh, I
right.
just feel like staying home." You know, like, no, I'm gonna have a dance party around the full moon. Everyone wants to come out and
Yeah,
celebrate, right? So that, I just think that's such a great starting place. And then if you can identify your own moon phase, as
mhm,
with you, knowing that you're born in
mhm,
the
mhm,
balsamic moon, and then you can have that time. I was born in the disseminating moon, which is just the phase after the full moon, right? So that's
okay,
always when I feel most myself and most, creative and fertile. So then I know, okay, if there's something, ooh, if I've been procrastinating this thing, it seems kind of hard, but I need to, okay, well, let me wait and do that when I'm in
okay,
my power time, right? When I'm in my moon
right,
power time.
right,
Another simple thing you can do with the moon is, if you know your sun sign, right? You're an Aquarius sun. Every time the moon goes into the sign Aquarius, and you can get just a simple astrology calendar. I love the wee
mhm,
moon, the wee
okay.
moon calendar, which, tells you which sign the moon is in every day. So
Oh, that's wonderful.
when the moon is in Aquarius, that's also a power time for you. When the moon is
Mhm,
in
mhm,
your sun sign, that's a power time. So even
okay,
just knowing your sun sign and knowing what sign the moon is in right now, Super simple. And
Yeah, that's good info.
right. And
Yeah.
I've always felt that, like, Virgo sun, whenever the moon's in Virgo, like, I just feel like, oh, I get so much done. I feel good. I feel more confident. So, and when it's in the opposite sign, lay low, right? So for you,
Okay.
when the moon's in Leo, like, I'm not going to push my agenda. I'm going to lay low. I'm going to wait to, ask my boss for a raise or do that thing that feels more edgy or risky. I'm going to wait. For now, I'm just going to lay low and, be of service to other people and not make it all about me.
Now, incidentally, my rising is Leo.
Ah, okay. Well, that makes it
So I don't know
trickier.
what that means,
Because
right?
okay, right. Well, and that's interesting too, because here we are again, back in the land of we are complex beings, right? So you have
Yeah. Yep.
opposite, your sun and rising sign are in
Yep.
opposite signs. So you're really majoring in that polarity of
Yeah.
Leo Aquarius. Leo, who's the rock star and the diva and the queen. Leo wants the attention and the applause. And Aquarius is like, no, 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 we're all just team players and support people, and I just want to be on the sidelines helping other people take center
Yes.
stage, right?
Well, yeah, what I've come to realize is I want to be taking care of everybody and helping everyone, but also I'm going to need you to say thanks.
Right.
And I've come to understand that about myself.
Right. And that is
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that is a very creative polarity. It is the
Mhm.
polarity of creation, where Leo is just about, like, creating, but then Aquarius distributes that
Mm,
creation
mm.
throughout the community. Also thinking about Leo as the heart and Aquarius the
Yeah.
circulatory system, right? So
Right. Right.
you
Right.
do what you love from the heart, put it out there, and then Aquarius, brings it out into the community and spreads the word. And what do you think about this? And you know,
In the form of podcasts.
perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's how we're doing it these days.
Well, and that makes it interesting too in terms of being a Capricorn moon and Leo rising, because Leo's the archetype of the child, right? There's an
Mm,
innocence and playfulness and celebration, right? And Capricorn is the elder. Capricorn is
right.
serious,
Yes.
and we got to think about the next 7 generations and be very adult and responsible, right? So there's that tension between, I just want to play and have fun and be in the moment,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's true. I feel all of that.
And again, all of
I was also
I was just gonna say all of that's good, right? And it's just making sure that, okay, make sure that the kid has a place to play, and the my adult elder self has a place to plan and strategize, and everybody gets to,
and just accommodate it. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I was gonna add before too, when you were talking about knowing the cycles of the moon. This doesn't necessarily help folks know sort of what constellation or what part of the zodiac it's in. But Apple Watch, one of the Apple Watch faces, does have moon phases. And I was delighted to just recently find that out. And so now one of the corners of my Apple Watch has the moon, and it's like a little picture of it. And so I can actually see every day how the phases are changing. It's been
Very
kind of fun.
cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
so
Yeah.
technology works for us, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's also fun, the star map apps, where you can, like, what is that? What am I looking at? And then
Yes,
and that can be a helpful way to get to know the sky as well. Um,
absolutely, absolutely.
I was going to say also, in terms of working with astrology on a daily basis, the days of the week are named for the planets.
Mhm,
Right?
mhm,
So if you, and of course, there's the obvious ones: Sunday, Moon Day, Saturn
right.
Day, right? But knowing that could be a simple way to play with the energies. So, for example, we are talking on a Wednesday, which is
Mhm,
Woden's Day, which is Mercury. Woden is the Norse god
mhm.
associated with Mercury. So I,
Yep.
I personally like to choose, since Mercury is the messenger god and the god of communication, I personally like to do podcast interviews on Wednesdays because we're working with Mercury, right? And also, if like, for example, you're an Aquarius, so
Mhm,
with a Capricorn moon, well, both Capricorn and Aquarius are traditionally ruled by Saturn. So to
Mhm.
know that your day of the week is Saturn day, right?
Okay.
And and
I'll plan all my good stuff on Saturdays.
exactly. Or and actually you're a real weekend child, right? Because then you've got
Mhm, mhm.
Sunday as the ruler, the sun rules Leo. So
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep,
right.
yep.
Whereas for me, being a Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury, I have Gemini rising, also ruled by Mercury. So I love Wednesdays. Like
You like
that's my day.
Wednesdays.
But if you can identify like what your sort of ruling planet, like the planet that rules your sun sign,
Mhm,
for
mhm.
keep it simple.
Okay.
Like, okay, you're a Sagittarius. Well, that's ruled by Jupiter. Okay, Thursday,
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
my day, and just pay attention to the different days of the week and the energies of the different planets to say like,
Yeah.
okay, well, Friday is Venus day, right? Vendredi, in French, right? So on Venus day, I'm going to do something to, make my house more beautiful, or I'm going to, bake something really delicious that, do something that feels really good, have a spa day, right?
Right,
Um,
right.
so you can sort of play with it that way too. And I like taking it's like, yeah, of course, getting a reading, knowing your own chart. I mean, like I said, I've been looking at astrology. I've been looking at my own chart for 40 years and I still see, get new perspectives and new revelations. And it's,
Right.
right? It's so valuable. But also, I like taking astrology out of the realm of it's all about me, right? And my
Mhm, mhm,
chart,
mhm.
and just to be more, engaging with natural time and engaging with the archetypes more on that like day-to-day living, level of okay,
Right,
it's
right.
Mercury's day. Let's see what, how can I play with that? Or it's Saturn
Right,
day. Oh, I
right.
better get some work done. Or yeah.
One of the things that the image that kind of popped into my mind when you said, even though you've studied your own chart for quite a while, it still reveals new things to you. I had this quick image of the Earth rotating on its axis as it revolves around the sun, and the fact that there's multiple types of movement there, and so yeah, it makes perfect sense that you would encounter these, this new knowledge because none of it is static. So
Right.
you're learning, it's like you have to relearn your chart for every new season of your life.
Right. Exactly. And of course it keeps it my chart changes and grows as I change and grow. And
Right,
just the
right.
way that if I'm doing a reading for a 20-year-old, I'm going to
Mhm,
talk
mhm.
about their chart in a really different way than I would for a 60-year-old.
Right,
Right?
right.
So the chart keeps evolving and we keep evolving and the planet, everything changes, everything is moving. We're in this great dance, and just thinking about
Mhm,
astrology
mhm.
as the dance, the ongoing dance of the planets and the dance of our own evolution. And I don't think, when it comes to like how does astrology work? I actually have no idea how it works. I just know that it does work. But I tend to think that the sky is really just reflecting life on earth. Like
Mhm.
it's not like the planets are making anything happen,
Right.
right? It's like it's just a reflection and a helpful reflection, again, to sort of give give us maybe a more objective or detached view of ourselves, of life on earth, by looking at it
Mhm.
through this mirror or this different lens. um
Yeah.
and again, I think it's all about relationship and connection, and I think that's something that is pretty mind-blowing with astrology, that if it works, like if what's happening way out there has an actual correlation with my day-to-day life, like we're living in a very magical, miraculous multiverse, if that's true, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Which I believe we
Which
are.
I
So
believe we
yes.
are. So I think there's
Yeah.
something about the practice of astrology, that helps us feel that connection with something bigger, that we're not alone
Mhm.
right? If it's true that there's a correlation between the planets and my life, how can I ever feel alone or,
Right.
abandoned by the universe? It's like, no, I'm connected with the freaking stars. Like
Yeah.
that's yeah.
And I think that is what makes me feel jazzy when I can see a planet from my front porch.
Yes.
It's that. It's that like, oh, we're a part of all of this. And how can life feel like anything less than a miracle if I can stand on my front porch in the Hudson Valley of New York and see Jupiter?
Right.
Like that to me is like, yeah, there's nothing else. That's it.
Right.
All of it.
And that you can
Yeah.
see Jupiter and to know that you can have a direct experience of Jupiter, that you don't
Mhm.
have to
Mhm.
wait to read a book about Jupiter or have a professional
Right.
astrologer tell you about Jupiter. You're having your own relationship. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's amazing.
yeah.
Emily, thank you so much. This was so informative, and an absolute blast to talk to you. Where can people find you if they would like to learn more about your work or work with you?
So my website is embodiedaquarian.com. And then there's a link to my podcast from there, but it's embodiedaquarian.substack.com is where my podcast is directly.
Okay.
And yeah, I teach classes online. I do readings for people. I do new moon and full moon kind of downloads or transmissions,
Okay.
and which is a lot about okay, what's the energy of now, and how can you best work with it? So
Okay.
my readings of the current time period are not about this is what's going to happen, so you better get ready,
Right,
but
right,
more
right, right.
about like okay, what's happening energetically, and how can you best surf those tides,
Like
how
navigate that.
yeah,
Yeah.
how can you
Yeah.
best co-create with that, like seeing it as
Okay.
again a relationship or a dance between us and the cosmos.
I love it. I will link to all of your stuff in the show notes so people can find you. And I hope everybody checks out your podcast. I'm definitely gonna because this is fascinating stuff. Is there anything that you had wanted to say that we didn't hit on before we wrap up?
I think we covered a lot, and I feel like I could just keep talking with you for hours, so that's probably a good
Same.
place to stop.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a follow-up maybe. We'll get some listener feedback and find out what other things they'd like to know based on this conversation, and maybe we'll
Yeah,
reconnect again and go down that path.
I would love to. It's been a total
Awesome.
pleasure to talk with you, Courtney.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You can send your topic ideas, questions to Courtney at shineandsoar.com, or you can fill out the communication form on shineandsoar.com/podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you love this content, please share it with your people. I'll see you again real soon. Thanks so much. Take good care of yourselves and each other.